You've activated my trap card might just be one of the most iconic phrases in all of Yu-Gi-Oh history. I know it definitely left an impact on me as a kid, and anyone who's watched the original season of Yu-Gi-Oh can definitely agree, I think, that those awesome moments where those back rows flip face up and reveal themselves to have some kind of wacky antic, it's pretty darn cool, and I think that was a huge attraction to the real game of Yu-Gi-Oh versus other card games. That lay in wait, the surprise activation was really exciting. So I want to go over, as an old duelist who has played since the very beginning, Structure Deck Kaiba and Yugi, Legend of Blue Eyes, the evolution of trap cards all the way till now, where we have the purple cards flying on out of our hand. They're just dropping out of the hand directly onto the field face up, and we've come a pretty far way into how they interact with today's game versus what they used to do. So in the very beginning and origin of the game, through the first set and two structure decks, trap cards were kind of lackluster. In these original sets, we don't really see too many cards in the way of competitive viability. Waboku is pretty awesome in the fact that it's able to reduce all battle damage to you to 0 and also protect your monsters by battle because of how it's written. However, it doesn't provide you a direct advantage. For stalling for that battle phase, you lose a card, and an advantage in old Yu-Gi-Oh is very, very powerful. So we won't see a resurgence in Waboku's play until much later. Then Trap Hole stuffs a monster and puts it in the graveyard if it has 1,000 or more attack on a normal summon. So this also is curved in its future viability for play as special summoning becomes more popular in Yu-Gi-Oh! But we head on over to Metal Raiders, the second set, and we gain Mirror Force, maybe the most recognizable trap card of all time in Yu-Gi-Oh's history. This awesome card is piloted by Yugi in the anime. He uses it against Evil Seto Kaiba, reflecting the attack back at him, and Mirror Force is an awesome card and competitive viability for a very, 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 very long time, seeing resurgence in play time after time, and it gets limited to 1 to be played because it's so dang good. You're able to wipe down the entire field of monsters coming at you and basically rob your opponent of their battle phase unless they have a recurrence trap, which doesn't happen till later in Pharaoh's Servant. We also gain Solemn Judgment, which pays half your life points to negate any card summon or spell or trap activation. But this card is actually so costly since we're in an advantage Yu-Gi-Oh at this point. We're playing for taking down a card at a time, so half your life points to do this isn't that viable at this point in the game, but will be much later. We move towards Pharaoh's Servant. Like I said, we get Call of the Haunted, we get Recursion, we head towards Invasion of Chaos, we get Ring of Destruction, a card that on demand can kill any monster on the field and inflict its attack points to both duelists directly, so you're able to end a lot of games, tie a lot of games where you don't have a winning situation. All these broken trap cards are crafted in the game because advantage is so important. Turning the tide of a board is so important at this time in Yu-Gi-Oh! So trap cards really were based off of kind of a timed activation for the most part. Like Ring of Destruction, you can activate any time, but Torrential is tied to that summon. You have Mirror Force tied to an attack. They're not just on demand at any time. And Yu-Gi-Oh! We fast forward a little, we enter the Synchro era, and you start to have these monsters that just on demand are able to deal with some of your trap cards' effects because they get quick effects to deal with it. Stardust Dragon is crafted in a way that it can deal with these destructions that Mirror Force and Torrential offer. So instead of having to read that they're there and take care of them by poking your opponent slowly and caring about advantage, you can just blanket cover them all by saying, oh, well, you can't destroy me. So trap cards need to start evolving in how they're played to be able to deal with cards that can deal with quick effects. You either need to stack multiple chain links or have a card that can negate effects. And effect negation becomes a huge wave in Yu-Gi-Oh! To where even today some of the most expensive cards are effect negation, but you get cards like Fiendish Chain and Breakthrough Skill in later Yu-Gi-Oh! That just go on demand. Oh, I'm gonna stop that monster's effect. So traps are really evolving to where we see that monsters are the problem and good traps are able to deal with that problem by taking down, just negating their effects. Now, one trap that I've left out until this point is probably the least fun kind of trap card, and that's coined to the term Floodgate. Floodgates are cards that stop your opponent from playing, and there's a lot of continuous traps that act as floodgates. One that was banned early on is Imperial Order, which stops your opponent and yourself from playing spell cards, period, but you get the advantage of activating all your spell cards earlier on that will help you out, and then just shut off your opponents after negating one when you flip it face up. Royal Oppression stops your opponent from special summoning and yourself at the cost of 800 life points, but you can do all your special summons early on and then stop your opponent from being able to special summon cards. And Floodgates are one of the only trap cards that see play in today's game through the fact that it's so powerful to be able to set up your board and then back it with a floodgate that will shut your opponent down. We see this really rise in the Dragon Ruler format where Vanity's Emptiness comes out, a card that stops special summoning, and it really surprises the dueling world. It hasn't been played much up until this point, and you're able to just shut down special summons. Yes, this card is so fragile. If any card on my side of the field is to leave, man, you can just take care of it, but you're able to shut down everything your opponent would do, and special summoning is so important to the game because monsters at this point have evolved so much that locking down special summons almost stops this card from leaving the field all on its own once you've set up your board. We also look to now Gozen match, Rivalry of the Warlords, being played heavily today, where they stop expanded strategies. They say you need to play a very linear type or attribute, or you cannot continue to go up your tree into your extra deck. You can't find ways to take this down through the extra deck, and that's pretty darn cool. Now let's kind of talk about what killed a lot of trap cards in general, and that's the evolution of spell and trap destruction. We had Heavy Storm and Harpy's Feather Duster, which eventually end up on our ban list. They are not allowed to be played in the game, but they could generically destroy all spell and traps. But we start evolving. We have Mystical Space Typhoon, which was so powerful it needed to be limited at one point, and we get Twin Twisters later on in Bosch. That's an insane set on its own, but this card's able to flip up, discard any card from your hand and take care of 2 spell and traps. So it seems like a 2 for 2, but again, monsters keep evolving through Yu-Gi-Oh! So monsters now get graveyard effects, and it's often you only lost 1 card, they lost 2 and lost their whole setup. We also get Cosmic Cyclone. You can pay 1,000 life points and banish a card on their field. And to match the power of traps, these are quick effects, so they can respond to Floodgate-like cards and take them down. But in today's game, traps have disappeared so much that spell and trap destruction isn't always necessarily in the side deck because we have it in the extra deck too. There's a card called Knightmare Phoenix where you're able to pitch a card from your hand and maybe get that card back in advantage from your deck, and then pop a back row. So you have all sorts of cards that really end up taking care of back row. So traps need to do several things. They either need to floodgate, they need to pop out of the hand so as not to be affected by spell and trap destruction, or just a large amount of spell and trap destruction would come back into play, or they need to just pop out of your hand magically to take care of your opponent, such as Evenly Matched, which was a very pricey card and still somewhat is at $30 after seeing its first reprint, and Infinite Impermanence, which currently sits above $80 freaking dollars. This card just pops out of your hand. Let's say you lost the dice roll. Your opponent opts to go first. I can just lay this card out of my hand in response to a opponent's monster effect and negate it. Just take it down, and it gets bonus effects when you set it to the field and activate it across from your opponent's spell and trap. So Impermanence really just has this total package feel for monster negation, and it's the new wave. And we even have a trap card that stops other trap cards by popping out of the hand. Talk about hunting your own. Red Reboot pops out of the hand to take care of trap cards and shut them down as well. So you can see through time, traps have needed to become more and more crazy in how they activate, and they've kind of lost that original feel of I'm gonna set a card down and react to what you do. The game's just evolved past that point where trap cards need to be so much more. They need to continuously hinder your opponent's gameplay. They need to be able to pop out of hand to avoid spell and trap destruction, or they need your archetype to be able to search them out so that the advantage is somewhat free, and then they need to have pretty busted effects from there in interactions with your monsters or what they do to your opponent. opponents. So, thanks so much for watching. We actually just opened up a P.O. box, so if you'd like to send things in, that's actually down below. And if you're on the Patreon, you can send in cards with return postage to be signed by us and returned to you. But if you'd like to send the channel anything, do let me know, and sign up on Patreon to support directly. Like the video if you enjoyed the conversation, subscribe if you haven't already, and what did you think of the history of traps? Of course, there's hundreds upon hundreds of traps that have entered the game, so it's hard to get all the major trap players through history, but this is just kind of a brief summary of the points that traps have had to evolve to because of how the game has interacted with traps versus the old kind of days where you just went, I activate my trap card, and it's more fun for the game rather than I activate my trap card before you do anything and I'm gonna try to stop you from playing. Thanks so much for watching, everybody.